Fear and anxiety are part of being human. We've all experienced that sinking feeling in our stomach before a big decision, the racing heart when facing the unknown, or the sleepless nights filled with endless what-ifs. But have you ever stopped to ask, what exactly am I afraid of? Buddha once said, "Rule your mind or it will rule you." Most of our suffering comes not from external events, but from the way our minds respond to them. Fear and anxiety often take hold when we lose touch with the present moment, projecting ourselves into an uncertain future. But what if there was another way? What if, instead of letting fear control us, we could observe it, understand it, and ultimately free ourselves from its grip? Today on the School of Buddha, we'll explore how Buddhist wisdom can help us overcome fear and anxiety, not by fighting them, but by changing how we relate to them. Let's begin. What exactly is fear, and how is it different from anxiety? Fear is a response to an immediate, identifiable threat. It's what kept our ancestors alive when facing wild animals or dangerous situations. This kind of fear, when well calibrated, is natural and even necessary for survival. Anxiety, on the other hand, is more subtle. It arises from perceived threats, uncertainties about the future, worries about failure, or fears of rejection. Unlike fear, which comes and goes with real danger, anxiety lingers, fueled by our thoughts and imaginations. Buddhism teaches that fear and anxiety arise from attachment, our attachment to control, comfort, and certainty. We become anxious when we are afraid of losing something or when we cannot predict what lies ahead. The Buddha described this tendency in a profound way. The wise do not grieve for what is lost, nor do they suffer from what has not yet come. Think about that. How much of our anxiety comes from imagining future scenarios that may never happen? We suffer twice, once in our thoughts and again when reality unfolds. But suffering from what is not is an unnecessary burden. Buddhist philosophy identifies three main reasons we experience fear and anxiety. 1. Attachment to control. We fear uncertainty because we want to predict and control everything. But life is inherently unpredictable. 2. Ego and identity. We fear judgment, failure, or rejection because we attach our sense of self to external validation. 3. Aversion to discomfort. We resist difficult emotions, wanting only pleasure and ease, forgetting that suffering is an inevitable part of life. By recognizing these patterns, we can start to loosen fear's grip on us. Instead of being trapped in anxious thoughts, we can step back and observe them with wisdom and awareness. But how do we do that? This is where mindfulness comes in. Fear and anxiety thrive in one place, the future. They pull us away from what is happening now, dragging us into endless what-ifs and worst-case scenarios. The more we feed these thoughts, the stronger they become. But what if we could step out of this cycle? This is where mindfulness comes in. Buddhism teaches that suffering is not necessarily caused by external events, but by our reaction to them. Mindfulness, or sati in Pali, is the practice of being fully present, observing our thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensations without judgment. Instead of running from fear, we learn to meet it with awareness and curiosity. Imagine sitting by a river. The water flows constantly, carrying leaves and branches downstream. Now imagine that each of those leaves represents a thought. Some are worries, some are regrets, some are fears of the future. Most of us react in one of two ways. 1. We cling to the thoughts, grabbing onto the leaves, analyzing them, and getting caught up in the current. 2. We try to stop the river, pushing thoughts away, resisting fear, and struggling against reality. But mindfulness offers a third option, watching the river flow without getting swept away. When we become mindful, we don't have to believe every fearful thought. We don't have to let every anxious emotion take control. Instead, we acknowledge their presence, observe them, and let them pass like clouds in the sky. Many people believe mindfulness means clearing the mind or getting rid of negative emotions. This is a misunderstanding. Mindfulness is not about eliminating fear, but about changing our relationship with it. A common Buddhist metaphor describes the mind as a vast sky and our thoughts as passing clouds. The sky itself remains vast and unshaken, no matter how many storms arise. Similarly, our true nature remains unchanged even when anxiety clouds our mind. The next time fear arises, try this. 1. Acknowledge it. Silently say to yourself, "This is fear." Don't fight it or suppress it. Simply recognize its presence. 2. Observe it. Notice where the fear manifests in your body. Is your chest tight? Is your breath shallow? Rather than panicking, become curious. 3. Allow it to be. Instead of thinking, "I must get rid of this feeling," try thinking, "I allow this feeling to be here." Acceptance creates space for the emotion to soften naturally. Mindfulness is not limited to meditation. It can be practiced anytime, anywhere. Here are 3 powerful techniques. Mindful breathing, anapanasati, using the breath as an anchor. One of the simplest yet most profound Buddhist practices is mindful breathing. The Buddha himself taught anapanasati, awareness of breath as a way to calm the mind. Try this. Sit comfortably and close your eyes. Take a deep breath in, feeling the air fill your lungs. Exhale slowly, releasing tension. Focus on each breath as it comes and goes. If your mind wanders, gently bring your attention back to the breath. This simple practice trains the mind to stay present instead of getting lost in anxious thoughts. Body scan meditation, releasing tension. Anxiety often manifests in the body. Tight shoulders, a clenched jaw, a restless feeling in the stomach. The body scan is a powerful way to become aware of these sensations and release them. Close your eyes and take a deep breath. Bring your attention to your toes. Notice any sensations, warmth, tingling, tension. Gradually move your focus upward, your feet, legs, stomach, chest, arms, until you reach your head. If you find tension, breathe into it, allowing it to soften. This practice helps us reconnect with the body and break free from anxious mental loops. Mindfulness in daily activities, turning routine into meditation. Mindfulness does not have to be practiced only in meditation. In fact, every moment is an opportunity to be mindful. When drinking tea, feel the warmth of the cup in your hands. Smell the aroma. Take each sip with awareness. When walking, notice the sensation of your feet touching the ground. Listen to the sounds around you. When washing dishes, feel the water on your skin. Observe each movement as if it were the first time. By practicing mindfulness in everyday activities, we train ourselves to stay present, reducing the power of fear and anxiety over our minds. One of the greatest gifts of mindfulness is that it creates space, a pause between stimulus and reaction. When fear arises, instead of immediately reacting with panic, we can take a breath, observe it, and respond with wisdom. Buddha once said, "Do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment." Fear and anxiety lose their power when we stop fueling them with attention. By practicing mindfulness, we train the mind to return to now, where peace is always available. Fear and anxiety often arise from self-doubt and self-criticism. When faced with challenges, we tend to judge ourselves harshly, believing that we should be stronger, calmer, or more in control. This inner critic fuels our suffering, making fear seem even more overwhelming. But what if, instead of being our own harshest critic, we became our own greatest source of kindness? This is where the Buddhist practice of self-compassion becomes essential. Self-compassion, as taught in Buddhist philosophy, is the ability to meet our own suffering with kindness rather than judgment. The Buddha recognized that suffering is a universal experience. No one is immune to fear, doubt, or pain. Instead of resisting these emotions or feeling ashamed of them, we are encouraged to hold ourselves with the same tenderness and care we would offer a close friend. At its core, self-compassion is built on 3 pillars: self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. Self-kindness is the ability to soothe ourselves when we are struggling, rather than responding with criticism. Common humanity reminds us that we are not alone. Every person experiences fear and anxiety at some point. And mindfulness allows us to observe our emotions without getting lost in them, creating the space for compassion to emerge. Many of us have a habit of being kind to others while being harsh on ourselves. Imagine a friend coming to you and saying, "I feel anxious about this situation. I feel like I'm not handling it well." Would you respond by saying, "You're right, you're weak and should be ashamed"? Of course not. You would offer words of support. It's okay to feel this way. Everyone struggles sometimes, you're doing your best. Yet when it comes to ourselves, we often take the approach of self-judgment rather than self-support. One of the most powerful ways to cultivate self-compassion is through gentle self-talk. The next time fear or anxiety arises, notice how you are speaking to yourself. Instead of saying, "I shouldn't feel this way," or "I'm weak for being afraid," try shifting your words to something more compassionate. It's okay to feel scared. This is a difficult moment, but I will get through it. The way we speak to ourselves has a profound impact on how we experience fear. Another practice rooted in Buddhist tradition is the metta bhavana, or loving-kindness meditation. This involves silently repeating compassionate phrases to oneself, such as, "May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be free from suffering." By sending kindness to ourselves, we begin to rewire our habitual responses to fear. Instead of reacting with self-criticism, we respond with warmth, patience, and care. This doesn't mean we ignore our emotions. It means we acknowledge them with love rather than resistance. Self-compassion also involves recognizing our shared humanity. Fear often makes us feel isolated, as if we are the only ones struggling. But when we take a step back, we see that suffering is a part of the human experience. Millions of people experience the same anxieties and worries. When we realize this, we move from self-pity to self-compassion. Instead of feeling alone in our struggles, we see ourselves as part of a greater whole, connected to others through our shared challenges. One of the greatest lessons from Buddhist wisdom is that we do not need to be perfect to be worthy of kindness. Perfection is an illusion. Fear and anxiety are not signs of weakness, they are part of the journey. When we embrace self-compassion, we learn to soften our resistance to these emotions and meet them with understanding. The next time you feel anxious, try placing a hand on your heart and taking a slow, deep breath. Remind yourself, "I am doing my best. I am human. I deserve kindness." In that moment, you are not fighting fear. You are holding it with compassion, and in doing so, you begin to transform it. Self-compassion does not erase fear, but it does change how we experience it. It allows us to approach our struggles with gentleness rather than resistance, making room for peace amidst uncertainty. And when we practice self-compassion consistently, we begin to realize that true strength is not about never feeling afraid. It is about facing our fears with an open heart, filled with patience, wisdom, and kindness. Fear and anxiety often arise from our resistance to uncertainty and our desire to control outcomes. We cling to the idea that things must go a certain way, that life should unfold according to our expectations. But life, in its essence, is unpredictable. The more we struggle to hold on to control, the more suffering we create for ourselves. The Buddha taught that much of our pain comes not from what happens to us, but from our unwillingness to accept things as they are. Learning to embrace acceptance and letting go is one of the most powerful ways to free ourselves from fear and anxiety. At the heart of Buddhist philosophy is the teaching of impermanence, or anicca. Everything in life, our thoughts, emotions, relationships, and even our own bodies is constantly changing. Yet we resist this truth. We become attached to people, outcomes, and identities, hoping that they will remain stable and predictable. But when reality does not align with our expectations, we feel anxious, frustrated, or even heartbroken. The key to peace lies not in controlling change, but in learning to flow with it. Letting go does not mean giving up or being indifferent. It means releasing our tight grip on how we think things should be and accepting them as they are. When we stop resisting reality, we create space for peace. Imagine holding a rope that is burning your hands. The more you cling to it, the more pain you feel. The moment you let go, the suffering stops. This is the nature of attachment. When we cling to ideas, expectations, or fears, we create our own suffering. But when we loosen our grip, we find freedom. Acceptance is not passive resignation. It is an active choice to meet life with openness and wisdom. Instead of thinking, "I don't want to feel this fear," we shift our mindset to, "This fear is here, and I can hold space for it." Instead of saying, "This should not have happened," we learn to say, "This has happened, now how? Can I move forward?" When we stop resisting, we stop adding unnecessary suffering to our experience. One of the greatest sources of anxiety is our attachment to certainty. We want to know what will happen, how things will unfold, and whether we will be okay. But life does not offer guarantees. The only certainty is that things will change. Rather than fearing the unknown, Buddhism encourages us to develop trust in the unfolding of life. Just as the sun rises without our control, just as the seasons change without our interference, life moves forward with its own rhythm. When we surrender to this flow, we find peace. A practical way to cultivate acceptance is through reframing our thoughts. When we catch ourselves resisting reality, we can ask, "Am I trying to control something beyond my power?" If the answer is yes, we can gently remind ourselves to let go. For example, instead of fearing failure, we can reframe our mindset. "Even if this doesn't go as planned, I will learn from it." Instead of fearing change, we can remind ourselves, "Everything is temporary, and I have the strength to adapt." This simple shift in perspective can transform the way we experience fear and anxiety. Another practice that supports letting go is meditation on impermanence. In Buddhist traditions, monks often contemplate the impermanent nature of all things to cultivate detachment and wisdom. You can try this practice by reflecting on simple truths. The breath comes and goes. The body ages. Emotions rise and pass, like waves in the ocean. By meditating on impermanence, we begin to loosen our attachments and embrace the transient nature of life. Letting go also requires us to surrender our illusion of control. There are many things in life we cannot control. Other people's actions, the passage of time, or unforeseen circumstances. But what we can control is how we respond. Instead of resisting, we can practice acceptance. Instead of holding on to fear, we can choose to trust. The Buddha taught that suffering diminishes the moment we stop clinging. The tighter we hold on to expectations, the more we suffer. But when we release them, we open ourselves to freedom and peace. True letting go is an act of courage. It means stepping into the unknown without fear, trusting that we have everything we need within us to face whatever comes. It means loosening our grip on the past and future, and instead, fully embracing the present moment. As we practice acceptance, we begin to realize that peace is not found in controlling life. It is found in surrendering to it. Fear and anxiety are often seen as obstacles, something to be eliminated, conquered, or avoided. But in Buddhist wisdom, fear is not an enemy. Rather, it is a teacher. Every moment of fear presents an opportunity to deepen our understanding of ourselves and the world. Instead of resisting fear or trying to suppress it, we can transform it into wisdom by seeing it as part of the natural unfolding of life. When approached with mindfulness and insight, fear can become a gateway to growth, resilience, and inner peace. One of the key Buddhist teachings that helps us reframe fear is the concept of dukkha, which refers to suffering or dissatisfaction. The Buddha taught that suffering arises not simply because fear exists, but because of our resistance to it. When we try to push fear away, it grows stronger. When we obsess over it, it tightens its grip. However, when we observe fear with awareness, we begin to understand its nature. Instead of reacting impulsively, we develop discernment, allowing us to respond with wisdom rather than panic. Fear often comes from the unknown, the uncertainty of what will happen next, whether we will succeed or fail, whether we will be accepted or rejected. Buddhism teaches that the unknown is not something to fear, but to embrace. Anxiety about the future is often a sign that we are too attached to a particular outcome. If we loosen this attachment, we also loosen the anxiety that comes with it. For example, instead of fearing failure, we can ask, "What can I learn from this experience no matter the outcome?" Instead of fearing change, we can remind ourselves, everything changes, and with each change comes new possibilities. When we shift our mindset, we transform fear into an opportunity for insight. Another powerful Buddhist practice for transforming fear is self-inquiry. Instead of being consumed by anxiety, we can turn inward and ask, what is this fear trying to teach me? Often, fear points to areas where we are attached, where we seek control, or where we have unresolved emotions. By examining our fears with honesty and curiosity, we uncover deeper truths about ourselves. For example, if we fear rejection, we might realize that we are placing too much of our self-worth in external validation. If we fear failure, we might discover that we are clinging to perfectionism. In this way, fear becomes a guide, illuminating areas where we can grow and letting us see where wisdom is needed. Buddhist monks and practitioners often cultivate equanimity, or upekkha, as a way to transform fear into wisdom. Equanimity is the ability to remain balanced and at peace no matter what emotions arise. This does not mean suppressing emotions, but rather seeing them with clarity and detachment. When we cultivate equanimity, we learn that fear is just another passing experience. Like a wave in the ocean, it arises, peaks, and eventually fades away. Instead of getting swept up in the wave, we can learn to observe it from the shore. One of the most inspiring examples of transforming fear into wisdom comes from the Buddha himself. Before his enlightenment, he meditated under the Bodhi tree and was visited by Mara, the embodiment of doubt, fear, and temptation. Instead of running from Mara, the Buddha simply acknowledged his presence and invited him to sit down. This is a profound lesson. Instead of battling fear, we can make peace with it. We can sit with it, observe it, and allow it to pass, knowing that it does not define us. A practical way to cultivate this mindset is through the practice of acceptance and surrender. When fear arises, instead of reacting, take a deep breath and say to yourself, "This too is part of my experience. This too will pass." By doing this, we shift from reacting with fear to responding with wisdom. Over time, fear loses its hold on us because we no longer see it as something dangerous. We recognize it as just another sensation, one that can be understood, accepted, and eventually released. Fear and anxiety can also be transformed through compassionate action. Often, fear keeps us stuck in our own minds, focused on our personal struggles. But when we shift our attention outward, helping others, practicing generosity, or offering kindness, we break free from the grip of anxiety. Acts of compassion not only benefit others but also dissolve our own fears by reminding us that we are part of something greater than ourselves. The Dalai Lama once said, "If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion." Helping others is a powerful way to transcend our fears and connect with the wisdom of the heart. Ultimately, transforming fear and anxiety into wisdom is about changing our relationship with them. Instead of seeing them as threats, we can see them as teachers. Instead of running from them, we can approach them with curiosity. And instead of being consumed by them, we can learn from them. Allowing each moment of fear to deepen our insight, strengthen our resilience, and guide us toward a more peaceful and awakened life. Fear and anxiety are not enemies to be defeated, but teachers to be understood. When we stop resisting them and start observing them with mindfulness, self-compassion, and acceptance, we begin to see that they are just passing waves in the vast ocean of our consciousness. The Buddha taught that true peace does not come from eliminating fear, but from learning to sit with it, to see through its illusions, and to respond with wisdom rather than reaction. Through mindfulness, we train ourselves to stay present, realizing that most of our fears exist only in our thoughts. Through self-compassion, we learn to meet our struggles with kindness rather than judgment, recognizing that we are not alone in our experiences. And through the power of letting go, we free ourselves from the weight of expectations, surrendering to the natural flow of life. The path to inner peace does not mean a life free of fear, but rather a life where fear no longer controls us. Every anxious thought is an opportunity to practice awareness, Every moment of doubt is a chance to strengthen our understanding, and every challenge is an invitation to deepen our wisdom. So the next time fear arises, pause, take a breath, observe it with kindness, and remind yourself, this too is part of the journey. If this video resonated with you, subscribe to the School of Buddha for more insights on mindfulness and inner peace. Don't forget to like, share, and comment below. How do you practice mindfulness in moments of fear? Let's continue this discussion and grow together on the path to wisdom. Until next time, may you walk with awareness and compassion,